Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast presented by Prize Picks. I'm your host, Samantha Praviti. Every Thursday here on this podcast, I will be answering your mailbag questions, which you can submit for future shows to mailbag@actionnetwork.com. On today's episode, I am joined by a special guest, a tortured Jets fan and Action's social media manager, Casey Halpern, who you can find on Twitter at Casey Halp. Casey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Samantha. How are you doing? First off, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on today. I'm looking forward to doing this.
Thank you for coming on. I know it's a crazy time for all of us, but I'm getting super stoked for week one. It's just so exciting. I obviously joined Action during the off season, so I'm really excited for this to be actually my first season doing this full time. So, what's something that you are most excited about for this season?
I mean, first and foremost, as you said so eloquently, I am a tortured Jets fan. So I'm excited about the beginning of a new chapter, a new era. The last few years and really decade or so, it's been nothing but turmoil and toxicity. But I think that's behind us. We seem to have a new structure in place where everyone is now aligned, including Coach Saleh and our GM, Joe Douglas. And we have a new quarterback, Zach Wilson. So I'm looking forward to watching them and mostly watching Wilson improve week after week this year. I know they're going to suck probably this year, but as long as they continue to get better down the stretch and mature every week and Wilson shows signs of growth and this team comes together, that's really all I could ask for from a fan standpoint. So I'm just excited to be excited about the Jets again until they let me down inevitably.
Well, I say tortured Jets fan with love. Obviously, I used to work at the New York Post, so I understand the sort of turmoil it is to be a Jets fan, maybe not to your extent for sure, but I certainly understand it. But yes, it's super exciting. Tony Romo is calling Zach Wilson like the next Patrick Mahomes. So it is going to be an exciting year to be a Jets fan. So
look, Tony Romo is a hell of an analyst. He was a hell of a quarterback. But let's just pump the brakes a bit. Let's just let Zach be Zach. Let him be himself, and let's see what happens his rookie season.
Awesome. Well, let us just jump right into it. Why don't you hit me with some mailbag questions? And guys, thank you so much for sending these.
Let's do it. Question number 1. John writes, Jamar Chase, Marvin Jones, or Devontae Parker?
Yeah, so of those guys, it's Chase, and it's not particularly close. Preseason chatter has been super down on the rookie, which has led to a pretty sharp drop in his ADP. But honestly, rookie struggles are pretty common. We heard very similar things from camp about Justin Jefferson last year. He's probably shaking off some dust from the year he took off from COVID. I mean, I think this is pretty expected. It may take him a couple games to begin to crest his full potential with Burrow, but I think his upside remains much higher than Jones or Parker's. I'd much rather have him, who's like maybe the second or third man on the Bengals depth chart right now, over Jones, who is the third man on the Jaguars depth chart, or Parker, who may have a slightly better situation in terms of competition, but it's in a Tua Tagovailoa-led Dolphins offense, who I just don't think can be relied on for consistent production. Parker's reliable fantasy years came with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm, so I think that's over. I'm going with Chase. What about you? How do you feel about that?
I'd have to agree with you there, especially in a season-long format. Just like, I feel like we're overlooking the fact that Jamar Chase was literally Joe Burrow's number 1 target when in his year at LSU, in his last year in 2019. The struggles he's having in camp right now are probably attributed to taking time off, and he even commented on that recently. So I'm not skeptical on his long-term outlook this year. I think him and Burrow's connection is very strong. And I think that really matters in the NFL. Like, there is that locker room chemistry between them. And as the great Adam Levitan coins it, the shower narrative, right? Like, these guys were around each other so much. Like, the connection is strong between them. There's going to be some obviously growing pains with Chase, but ultimately he is definitely the best long-term play here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see them play together. Obviously, it was amazing to see them play at LSU. So yeah, I think it's gone too far in one direction. I think it was always like, it began that he was a little too inflated, I think, for my taste. And now it's kind of flipped. So I am starting him over the other two for sure.
100%. And people forget, like, he literally, as a sophomore, 19-year-old at LSU, he had 1,700 yards and 20 touchdowns.
Literally unbelievable production. So All right, let us move on to the next question.
Number 2, Aaron writes, in a half PPR league, a quick start or sit question for my flex spot, Joe Mixon or Brandon Ayuk?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mixon by a landslide. And this is not just the Joe Mixon truther in me speaking. I know that it's like become part of my social media brand, but Mixon gets such a bad rap about his injuries. But honestly, he's played more games than Dalvin Cook, who's being drafted as a consensus top 3 pick. Now, yes, he has not produced to Dalvin Cook's level, but I think that this is his year. I know I make excuses for him every single season, but this is his year. There's no Gio Bernard. Hopefully we will get a healthy Joe Burrow. So I really like him over Ayuk. There are also concerns that Ayuk may not be 100% for week 1. It's a good matchup against the Lions, but Mixon's matchup is arguably even better. I think that Jeff Okudah will be all over Ayuk. And Mixon is going against a Minnesota defense that allowed the 6th most rushing yards per game last year. So give me Mixon over Ayuk all the time.
Everything you said, I agree with. I mean, Mixon just has the higher floor in the scenario, right? He's going to get way more touches than Ayuk, especially in week 1, I would say early on. And look, if Mixon could stay healthy, he's going to be a top 5, top 10 running back this year. Just like yourself, I rostered Mixon last year. It was disappointing. Yeah. That foot injury that just kept on lingering, but he would still be spotted at practice. I was checking in on those updates, like literally stalking Ben Baby's feed all day to see what was going on with him. He did disappoint me.
That feeling where you were literally stalking the beat writers, just trying to figure out what is happening.
Like no one knew what was really going on with his foot. It was a day-to-day thing, and then it became week to week, and then they were just like, he's not going to play the rest of the year. But in terms of this week, I just think you have to roll with Mixon, right? He's their bell cow running back. He's going to get way more touches, and he just has that higher floor to start off.
Yeah, we're talking about someone that I think will be a RB1 this week. Like I think he'll finish top 12 versus Ayuk, who is like a fringe wide receiver too. So yeah, it's just a way safer play in my opinion. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to the third question.
Question number 3. This is a good one. Philip writes, I drafted both Philly receivers after drinking way too much on draft day. It's a half PPR league. Who do I go with? Devontae Smith or Jalen Reagor?
Yeah, so friends don't let friends drink and draft or draft both Eagles receivers. But, given that you are in this suboptimal pickle, Philip, and presumably you have to start or keep one, it wasn't really super clear. I would keep Smith, despite concerns about his stature and durability. He was just ridiculously productive last season. Reagor is nothing more than a dart throw at this point. I mean, he didn't produce during his first season and was probably the biggest bust of that wide receiver class, which was incredible, super, super deep. So yeah, I mean, it's not even a question at this point. I think Smith may take a little bit of time to kind of warm up. And yeah, I don't really love either of them or both of them, for season long this year, just because I need to see Jalen Hurts develop as a passer. But given you're in this situation where you have to decide on one, I'm going with Smith.
Yeah, I have to agree with you here. I know it sounds like a broken record. Me and you are disagreeing with each other, but look, Devontae Smith, I think, is a stud. He won the Heisman Trophy last year. We all know what he did at Alabama. But I want to tie something back. He's played with Jalen Hurts before. As we said before, in regards to Chase and Burrow, that locker room narrative applies to Devontae Smith as well. He has practiced with Hurts. He's played in real games with Hurts before. And now they're playing with each other in the pros. And I know Howie Roseman has absolutely whiffed on his wide receiver choices the past few years, including taking JJ Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf.
That's literally like a meme. Like
it's terrible. And then doubling up in the next year and taking Reagor one pick before Justin Jefferson. I think the third time is the charm, and I think he hit the nail on the head this time with Devontae Smith. That man is just so smooth. I think he's going to crush it in Philly.
Yeah, even a broken clock is right twice kind of thing. Like I think that at this point, of all the guys, that he's whiffed on, Smith, I just don't see it happening. I am super high on him. I was I was angry at first that people were so down on him with the BMI crap, but I was a little happy just because I was getting him at quite a discount earlier in the offseason.
I think he's going to be a stud. And I think, yeah, as you said, people are just low on him due to the fact that he probably weighed less than I did when I was 7 years old, soaking wet. But look, he's going to bulk up. He'll get stronger as the season goes on, hopefully. And it's not like it's his first day playing like big league football. He played in the SEC and he was incredibly durable. So I have no reason to believe that that won't continue in the future.
Awesome. All right, let us move on to the next question.
Question number 4. Ian writes, is there a player either returning from injury like Saquon Barkley or a player who is holding out like TJ Watt that's worth starting on my week 1 fantasy squad? So I guess this is for an IDP league as well.
I think he just meant, I interpreted that to mean like just someone who is holding out. It didn't have to be I don't know that many people on the offensive side that are holding out, like big name players. So I'm going to focus on the injury side of that. I mean, for what it's worth, the leagues that I have Barkley, I'm starting him. Like, I don't know who else you would start over him. Like, unless you are super stacked, like I don't see a situation where I am sitting him. I get the concerns. He's going to see probably a limited workload or something just a little bit less. But he has crazy upside. And, you know, I don't know. I think that the injury stuff is really tough to predict for sure. But, you know, there are a number of guys that I would feel comfortable starting in week 1 coming off major injuries. That includes Christian McCaffrey, which because he is the 101 of all fantasy drafts. But George Kittle and Dak Prescott, I also feel pretty comfortable starting this week. Injuries are tough, man. But like guys like Barkley, who you presumably spent like a late first or early second round pick on, I don't see you sitting him in week 1. Like, I don't know what other options you have unless you had like, I don't know, maybe like Jonathan Taylor and I don't know, CEH or something like that. Like I could see where you could have all 3 if you went super robust. And in that case, maybe I would consider like starting CEH over Barkley just to see how the workload goes, see how that offensive line behaves. That's obviously a huge pain point, but yeah, I think you'll feel foolish just sitting him. And then if he, ends up getting a 2 touchdown game.
Yeah. I mean, I just have 3 words to add to this. Literally, start your studs. Yeah. You don't sit them, right? Like, just start them, play them. He's going to give you the highest ceiling and probably the highest floor, So just start your studs. Don't overthink it. Hopefully the injury's behind them and hopefully he has a great year.
Yeah, it's not like he had any major setbacks either. Like, I think people were really worried about him not practicing kind of early on and being on the pup, but that was all to be expected. So honestly, like, I'm going moderate steam ahead with him. And yeah, start your studs. You're just going to feel shitty if you don't start him.
He's had it's almost been a year since he got hurt. And I think they've just been easing him along the way during training camp, mini camp, all that stuff. And I think he's ready. He's ready for the workload. And as we've said, start your studs. Don't overthink it. Put him in there. Let's roll.
Yeah. And honestly, like with the injuries, obviously it's really tough, but if they are playing in week 1 and they are on your starting roster, like you should be starting them. Like, obviously don't just start anyone, but if you're like in a 2 quarterback league and you have Joe Burrow as your second quarterback, like I also feel comfortable starting him. If the team feels comfortable putting them out there is what I'm trying to say, is that I think that they will be fine.
Agreed.
All right, let us move on to question 5.
Question 5. Brad writes, who is the best week 1 tight end streamer? I have Noah Fant, but I'm getting concerned about this mysterious injury.
Yeah, this is really a tough one because the Broncos have been super tight-lipped. Fant is expected to play, I believe, and, it's concerning, but none of the waiver wire guys are going to be worth starting over Fant, in my opinion, like unless someone like Logan Thomas is sitting on your waiver wire for some reason, which like, I just can't imagine that being a scenario. Like, I don't know who, like maybe Jonnu Smith, like I might start Jonnu Smith over Noah Fant, who I guess in some leagues, like some really shallow leagues where everyone just drafts 1 tight end. I could see that situation, but of the waiver wire tight ends under 50% rostered right now, I would take a look at Zach Ertz, who is 33% rostered. Atlanta's secondary is atrocious and allowed the most passing yards per game in the NFL in 2020. So like, if you're really looking for someone else, if you Fant ends up just not playing and, is a late scratch or something like that, I would look at Ertz.
So I have one name that's just way, way, way down the line for a possible streamer at tight end this week. I would have to go with Donald Parham, the 6'8", 260-pound behemoth on the Chargers. I mean, he was an XFL stud. I really think he has a lot of potential in the NFL, and new Chargers OC Joe Lombardi has been talking him up all week and pretty recently just about how much he's impressed them. So if you're really looking for a dart, I would go with Donald Parham of the Chargers, right? Gerard Davis, rookie linebacker from Kentucky, is probably going to be the one tasked with covering him on Sunday in Washington. So maybe he gives the rookie some fits, and maybe this is Donald Parham's coming out party in week 1. And he's only 1% roster. So He's out there.
Definitely out there. I think he would be a good name to either stash or keep an eye on. I'm pretty concerned about the Chargers week 1 matchup. But yeah, I think he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. All right. Next up here on the Fantasy Flex is a new segment we call Elite Entries, where we are going to dive into the Prize Picks app to build some entries. And for any listeners unfamiliar with Prize Picks, it's just a super simple way to play DFS. Prize Picks offers a bunch of fantasy and prop markets, both for daily and season long. Standard stuff like Zeke Elliott rushing yards this season or Josh Allen's week 1 fantasy score. You choose the picks you like and you build your entry. You can go with 2, 3, 4, or even 5 picks, and your payout is based on how big your lineup is and how much you risk. For example, let's say you choose 2 props. You go under on Zeke rushing yards and over on Allen's fantasy points. And let's say you choose $25 for your entry fee. If they both hit, you win 3 times your entry fee, $75. Boom, just like that. And if you build your entry with 4 props, you can win as much as 10 times your entry fee. So like I said, really simple. I'll identify some markets I like. You build your own Prize Picks entries, and all of us have a little fun and make some money. So today we are going to look at Thursday night plays for week 1 on Prize Picks. I'm just so excited. It's almost Thursday. It's football eve. So let's kick it off. The first play that I really like is Dak Prescott under 285.5 passing yards. So I just mentioned this. I have no issue starting Prescott off the injury as your QB1 because I just don't know what better options you would have on your roster. But I would temper expectations in his return from a gruesome injury against the Bucs, who recorded the 6th most sacks per game last year. Vegas has the total at 52 points, and the line is -8 in favor of Tampa, which puts the Cowboys' implied points at 22, which is not that much considering how many weapons Dallas has. And the first game of the year tends to go under, so I think I like his passing yards to go under. What's UTC?
I completely get where you're coming from, and your reasoning is very sound for why you would go under here, right? Like, it is his first game back from a horrible injury he suffered last year, and he had a bit of a shoulder strain in training camp and was extremely limited. That being said, though, Dak Prescott is my QB1 in fantasy this year. He is my starter. So I'm going to have to fade you here. I'm going opposite. I'm hoping going over. Hopefully maybe they get Tampa caught in a shootout, or maybe Dallas is down all game and they just have to throw to get back in it. I'm optimistic that Mike McCarthy and this offense won't really be running the ball too much as like he has in years past. I mean, if you look at last year, Dak threw for over 450 yards in 3 of the 4 full games he played. So hopefully he can replicate that in week 1. He'll make fantasy manager Casey very happy, and maybe some Dallas Cowboys bettors pretty happy.
Yeah, I have this narrative a bit different just because I mean, like the Bucs, they kept all 22 starters. I just feel like they are going to be such a force to be reckoned with this season. And it's just going to be a tough game for Dak to come back to with that D line. But yeah, I mean, we'll definitely see how this shakes out. The next one that I like is OJ Howard over 18.5 receiving yards. So Howard is definitely an afterthought after suffering a season-ending Achilles tear in week 4 last year. But what we did see of him and his connection with Brady was encouraging. He's a former first-round pick. He outproduced Gronkowski while he was healthy. And with Gronk on the wrong side of 30, I feel like there's a clear path to Howard stepping up into a larger role if he can stay on the field. 18.5 receiving yards feels like nothing against a middle of the road Dallas defense. What do you think?
I agree with you here. The commentary around OJ Howard this preseason and in training camp has been great. Brady said he's prepared to have a great season. And look, all you need is 19 yards here. That could easily come on a seam
One
route.
catch. Yeah.
Literally just a 20-yard seam route. Boom, easy winner right there. Let's roll with the over on Howard, 18.5 receiving yards.
All right. Copacetic on that one. And next one that I like is Mike Evans over 0.5 receiving touchdowns. So in spite of last year's optimism for his counterpart, Chris Godwin, Evans actually finished far and away the Bucs top receiver. He was wide receiver 9, while Godwin was wide receiver 38.5 PPR. Last season, Evans caught nearly 200 more yards and 6 more touchdowns than Godwin, who struggled with injuries that sidelined him for 4 games. Godwin is now back on the injury report heading into week 1 with a mysterious quad issue. I think that's enough to warrant concern, which is all spells good news for Evans, who has clear red zone chemistry with Brady. That was just very apparent last season. Touchdowns are obviously harder to predict than normal production type stats, but I think he's the surest bet on this team.
I agree with you. So this is going to be Mike Evans's 7th year in the NFL, I believe. Off the top of my head, he's scored a touchdown in week 1 in 4 of those 6 previous seasons. So that's literally 66% of the time he's going to score in week 1. I don't see why that changes this year. Let's take the over on Evans to have 1 touchdown this week. And who knows if Godwin's even playing, right? Like right now, it's kind of up in the air, his status. And if Godwin's downgraded to doubtful or out, then Mike Evans will likely see more targets, and he's always going to be the go-to guy in the red zone, him and Gronk. So he'll definitely get his share of opportunities.
Yeah, and it is Evans' 8th season in the NFL. Just
8th season, excuse me.
No, all good. I feel like Evans and Gronk, if you're gonna pick someone to score a touchdown, it feels like one of them from Brady. So the last one that I like is Ezekiel Elliott under 16.2 fantasy points. Keep in mind, this is full PPR. Tampa's run defense was super fearsome last season. They just allowed 80.6 rushing yards per game. They have one of the top front sevens in the league that I think will probably box up Elliott, who scored more than 16 fantasy points in full PPR twice since week 6 last season, once against the Eagles and again against the Vikings, who ranked 22nd and 26th in rushing yards allowed last year, respectively. So, I mean, they didn't play each other last year, but Washington, who had a comparable run defense to the Bucs last year, held Elliott to 6.1 and 2.9 fantasy points in Dallas's 2 matchups against them, which is not great. The Cowboys will also be without star guard Zach Martin, who tested positive for COVID-19. I think this is a pretty significant blow for the team's offensive line. This is going to hurt Elliott, so I am going under on his fantasy points. I love him season long, but I just think this is a brutal week 1 matchup.
Oh, I hate that we're in alignment on so many of these. On 3 of the 4, I'm completely
great
agree
minds,
with you.
Casey. Great minds.
Right? This is true. Decent minds think alike, they say, right?
Yes, let's just say mediocre minds. Yeah.
Exactly. To all the points you laid out, right? Like Zeke hasn't had over 16 fantasy points since week 10 of last season against a horrible, horrible Vikings defense. We all know how good the Buccaneers defense is. We all know how good that defensive front is and that front 7. Look, they're loaded up front, and the loss of Zach Martin is massive, especially for a Zeke rushing standpoint, right? Like Martin is an all-pro offensive guard. He's arguably one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. He's a future Hall of Famer, And I just think Zeke is going to have a hard time fighting for yards against this Buccaneers front.
Yeah, that and the stuff that you mentioned about Mike McCarthy and, his historic use of the run game, not spelling super well for Zeke. So, all right, that is our elite entry for Thursday Night Football, going with Dak Prescott under 285.5 passing yards, OJ Howard over 18.5 receiving yards, Mike Evans over 0.5 receiving touchdowns, and Ezekiel Elliott under 16.2 fantasy points. As a reminder, you can mix and match fantasy points and player props to make your lineups super spicy. Also, Prize Picks markets move, so you'll want to be nimble to lock in the best numbers. If you haven't created a Prize Picks account yet, please check out the link in our episode description, because Prize Picks has a special offer for Fantasy Flex listeners. They will match your first deposit up to $100. Just click the link in our episode description or or visit prizepicks.com and use promo action10. All right, let's keep it moving here on our mailbag episode.
All right, question number 6. Thomas writes, at the moment, I don't have a defense roster. To pick up a defense, I would have to drop one of the Moore brothers, either Elijah or Rondell. Don't drop Elijah Moore, I'm telling you. Or Tyson Williams, the running back on the Ravens. Would you go ahead and skip a defense in week 1?
Yeah, so let me first say that drafting a defense or kicker is a sucker move. So I'm super happy you totally understood that assignment. That said, unless you're projected to absolutely annihilate your week 1 opponent, it seems way too risky to not play a defense. And honestly, I don't trust projections. So I don't really even know that would be a good argument. Why risk a win right now for a potentially viable RB3 or wide receiver 3? These are guys that you're probably not, even in the best case scenarios, probably not starting. You're maybe considering them for flex plays or considering them on bye weeks, but I just don't see why you would put your week 1 matchup in jeopardy. For what it's worth, of those 3 though, I'd personally drop Rondell Moore. Elijah has less competition, albeit in a more anemic offense, but and Williams could emerge as a serviceable running back without J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. Just don't forget, though, Baltimore's top rusher is Lamar Jackson. And I don't know that, any of those guys are worth keeping instead of playing a defense in week 1. What about you? What do you think of this?
Yeah, you definitely need a defense in week 1, right? You don't want to take any unnecessary risk coming out of the gate and just thinking you're going to steamroll your opponent, unless he's maybe just trotting out a bunch of bench players and is just playing in a league for fun. Pick up a defense. Don't get too cute. If I had to drop one of those 3, I would probably lean Tyson Williams, but this is all dependent on how big your league is, right? You have to know the players in your league. Is someone sharp enough to maybe scoop him up immediately? Because he's kind of this question mark. I have Tyson Williams actually rostered in one league right now, but who knows how many carries he's going to get. And as you noted before, Lamar Jackson is their top rusher. We know how much they love Gus Bus Edwards. So I can't forecast his role, but I'm very bullish on Rondell Moore and Elijah Moore. And I think those guys have real pop potential. And I just think their ceilings are way higher, where I would be a little scared to drop either of them.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think Rondell Moore has a little bit more time. He probably isn't going to come out of the gate swinging type guy, just because he is probably the 4th man on that depth chart. Now, that said, the Cardinals play the most for wide receiver sets in the NFL. So, I could definitely see him carving out a role. That's why I was just saying, of those 3, if you have to drop one. And I think that that's a really good point too, in terms of knowing your league, because there is a good chance that I feel I always waffle with these decisions, before a game starts, all right, I got to pick up a defense. Who do I drop? There's a really good chance that the guys that you think are going to perform really well, you think are, down the line stashes, maybe no one else thinks that right now. So there's a good chance you'll be able to pick someone up later.
It's so important to just study your league and know your opponents and just kind of learn their tendencies, because that really just gives you an advantageous edge.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next question.
Question number 7. Jeremy writes, who do you think the top waiver wire pickups will be after week 1? Players that I could stash now if I have an empty roster spot.
Yeah, I love this galaxy brain stuff, start the early waiver wire thoughts, where you do it, before the Thursday night game and just try to keep, or before the games, and try to get someone that you think will be the guy. Tyson Williams definitely is up there. He's 35% rostered. He's a guy that I feel if you're in the football space and very in it, kind of alluding to what you said, he's a guy that we all know, but in a lot of people's leagues, he's not a guy that's going to be on people's radar. And if he goes off in week 1, I feel he will be the top waiver claim. So yeah, he's playing the Raiders. So that also means there's a good chance he could go off. The Raiders defense is terrible. He's got Kansas City in week 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy that I've been pumping up all off season. He is 7% rostered playing San Francisco in week 1. He is at Green Bay in week 2. He's a guy that, has just so little competition on that depth chart. He's not necessarily even close to the top 5 receivers that came out of that class, but it's all about opportunity. And yeah, we kind of like crap on this Detroit team, and it is bad. I mean, it's a Jared Goff led Detroit offense. But that said, I think he has a very clear path to be a wide receiver, like their top wide receiver. And I think if he catches a touchdown in week 1, he could definitely be a spicy waiver claim. Zach Ertz, we already talked about, at 34% rostered. He's going up against Atlanta in week 1, which, like I said, is a awesome matchup. He wants to play out his career in Philadelphia. I mean, it was all up in the air, obviously, this offseason. We thought that maybe he was to be traded to like the Bills or something, but obviously that didn't happen. And I think he's going to have a role. Like, we were drafting him like a top 3 tight end last year. And yeah, we totally wrote him off this year. He was like, his ADP was, I think, like tight end 30 in a lot of places because we just didn't know. And Dallas Goedert was going as high as tight end 6. I just think both are going to have a role. And yeah, I mean, it's also in an offense led by Jalen Hurts, but I think he's going to have a role. And then OJ Howard, we kind of talked about at 3% rostered. He's going up against Dallas. I think it's a great matchup. And then he is at home versus Atlanta in week 2. We just talked about Atlanta's defense. So I think all 4 of those guys, if you have roster space and if they're available in your leagues, they could be a sneaky ad right now.
Yeah, I think Tyson Williams is really just the intriguing name here. As we just said, like, he's this question mark, like, right? We know about him in the fantasy community. He's been getting talked up a ton by Harbaugh and company. It's just, we don't know exactly what his role will be. So I think seeing how that plays out on Monday Night Football in Vegas is going to be very interesting. And if he is in line for double-digit touches, I think he will become the number 1 waiver claim after week 1. And just like, they have no one else on that roster currently. It's just Gus Edwards, Tyson Williams. I know they just signed Le'Veon Bell to the practice squad, but
that's
as
a Jets squad. Don't even overreact to that. I think people were automatically like writing off Gus, and I was like, that almost has that has very little impact on Gus.
And Le'Veon Bell has literally been cooked for close to 5 years now. Yeah. Like, his last great year came in 2017, and then he skipped the year, and then he signed with the Jets and was under the shackles of Adam Gase. And I mean, look, like, it wasn't a favorable scheme. It did him no favors, but he also didn't look good in his time on the field, right? Like, he didn't produce. And then when he went to Kansas City last year with offensive mastermind Andy Reid, like, he didn't produce there either. So yeah, something has to give. I don't think he has the juice anymore. Unfortunately, I think his best days are behind him, and he's someone I absolutely used to love, still love him. It's just, I think his best days are ultimately behind him. And I think there is a real opportunity for Tyson Williams to take a large part of touches away from Gus Edwards. So it's just going to be interesting to see how that shakes up on Monday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, again, state that Le'Veon Bell getting signed to the practice squad, like, don't read too much into that. The only reason you're freaking out, not you, collectively, everyone is freaking out about it, is because like they know Bell's name. Like, he was the top fantasy pick a few years ago. So it's really easy to have that brand recognition and think like, oh, he's going to steal touches away. But I don't see that happening. And also, like, the Ravens wide receiver core is also super, super banged up. So like, there are a lot, I think there's just going to be a lot of rushing opportunities. So Tyson Williams could definitely be a top waiver claim next week.
Definitely. All right, let's go on to question number 8. So Twitter handle @catfishM4 writes, we playing Justin Herbert this week in a rough matchup. What are your thoughts on Allen Robinson as well?
Yeah, both of those guys don't have good matchups this week, but unless you have better options, and like I said, like, I don't know that you have better options if you have Herbert. I just don't know how you're sitting him in that same range though. Like, if you ended up rostering like 2 kind of middle to bottom tier QB1s. Like I would play like Tom Brady, I would play Jalen Hurts, I would play Ryan Tannehill over him, and I would even consider playing Matt Stafford over him. So that's kind of the range. Like I'm putting I like Herbert season long. I think he may regress from the crazy season he had in his rookie year, just with like a number of things working against him, that team really improving their defense, their coach with a very defensive mind. But, this week is just going to be absolutely brutal. So like I said, unless you have better options, I assume you're playing him without knowing this person's other receivers. I'm going to say, yes, start Robinson. It is extremely less than ideal. He's going to be against Jalen Ramsey and that Rams secondary, which allowed the fewest passing yards in the NFL last year. But in a majority of scenarios, I don't think you have a better option on your roster. Like I still see him finishing as a top 24 receiver. So unless you ended up rostering, like 3 or 4 top 24 receivers, which in most cases people didn't do that, unless it's that, like you're probably playing Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, this just, again, for Allen Robinson, this goes back to what we talked about with Barkley, right? Start your studs. Don't sit them. I highly doubt you have a better option than Allen Robinson sitting there on your bench. As far as Herbert goes, it is a very tough matchup for him, especially with a rookie head coach going on the road to Washington. They have an amazing defense, an incredible front seven. So I'd be a little weary of starting him, but it all depends on who's on the bench, right? Like if you had a serviceable quarterback to play over him, like someone like Ryan Tannehill, as you said, Tannehill has a much favorable matchup against a weak Cardinal secondary. So it all depends on your depth behind Herbert. So I have to leave that question up to you to figure out. But if you have someone better on the bench that with a better matchup, I would start him over Herbert, but I would 100% start Robinson. Just start your studs. Don't overthink it. Put him in there. And let's see what he could do against Jalen Ramsey and that Rams secondary.
Yeah, it's tough with the Herbert situation. Like I said, I would play, Brady, Hurts, Tannehill, and maybe Stafford over him. But like where you're getting into like the dicey part, like who are you picking up on the waivers, or like who do you have as your second quarterback that you feel super, super confident about? Like if you have Joe Burrow, like I don't think I'm starting Joe Burrow over Justin Herbert. I don't think I'm starting, like, for instance, like Kirk Cousins, like would probably be in that range. Trevor Lawrence, I'm probably not starting him over, Justin Herbert. So like these guys who might be available on your waivers or like might be a bench play, like I still am not starting them over Herbert.
I agree. All those names you mentioned, Hurts, Brady, Stafford, Tannehill, I would start them over Herbert. I have one more question for you to piggyback on this though. Baker Mayfield or Justin Herbert? Who would you start this week?
Justin Herbert.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think I'm aligned with you there.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Let us move on to the next question.
Question number 9. John writes, I finally did it. In one of my half PPR leagues with one running back slot and an extra flex position, I went 0 RB and ended up with Chase Edmonds and Darrell Henderson. My question is, do I start Chase Edmonds or Darrell Henderson?
Yeah. Very brave of you to go 0 RB, but I would obviously, if I were to ever do it, it would be in a league where I have to start one running back. So kudos to you. I think those are pretty decent 0 RB running backs to end up with. Of those two to start in that one slot, I'm going to go Henderson, but it's pretty close. Like Henderson just doesn't have a lot of legitimate competition out of the Rams backfield. Like they signed Sony, but like I'm not super concerned about him. I think that Henderson's real issue is going to be like long-term durability, but I think that he's going to be the top guy. He's going to be the 3-down back. Whereas Edmonds, I mean, they really like muddied up that situation, signing James Conner. And I think we really wrote off Conner with, his last season with the Steelers. It just, obviously nothing was clicking in the run game for the Steelers last season, but I think he definitely has miles left in the tank. And I could see Chase Edmonds and James Conner ending up in a 50-50 timeshare, or some kind of timeshare. So he's got a lot more competition. So I am going Henderson. What about you?
I agree here. I think you have to go Darrell Henderson here, especially in week 1. We are unclear on what that timeshare is going to look like in Arizona between Connor and Chase Edmonds. And all signs point to Darrell Henderson being the Rams' clear-cut RB1. I know they brought in Sony Michel who they brought in for a fourth round pick. But I just think Henderson gives them a lot more versatility. And also Henderson had a very like solid 2020 and he wasn't even RB1, right? Like he rushed for 620 yards and 5 touchdowns. And in the Rams game against Chicago actually last year, Henderson had 17 touches alone. He had 63 rushing yards and 13 receiving yards. So I think the volume is going to be there for Henderson in week 1 against this Bears defense. And I think there's an opportunity for him to really take control of RB1 and just leave Sony Michel in the dust. And the cool thing about Henderson is he's playing on Sunday Night Football. So maybe you have to play from behind a little Sunday, and then maybe he could be your week 1 winner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sean McVay clearly likes him. It was a very frustrating 3-man backfield last year. And they had too many running backs last year, and now they have no running backs this year. Not no running backs, but certainly not the depth that, you feel comfortable with. Malcolm Brown's on the Dolphins and Cam Akers is out for the season, unfortunately. So I'm really excited to see how this offense also functions without Jared Goff, like if they're going to be pounding the rock as much, or if they're going to be leaning way more on passing. But certainly all those things considered, still going Henderson. All right, let's do one more question.
One more. This is a special question. Question number 10. Alex writes, who are you starting this week at your flex? Kareem Hunt or Trey Sermon in a half PPR league?
Yeah, this is pretty close. I would say the matchup for Sermon is better against a really bad Lions defense, but I'm going to go Hunt in any format with points per reception, even half PPR. I just think he's a much safer play. Like we've seen how Hunt's role is going to be in this offense. Like he just has an established role with Nick Chubb, and he's not going away, much to the dismay of Chubb managers. But on the other side, with Mostert healthy and Kyle Shanahan being Kyle Shanahan, like I just don't know that you can really rely on Trey Sermon, especially in his rookie debut. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think Kyle Shanahan is just incredibly unpredictable, right? Like no one has any idea what he's kind of going to do. Like he's had a very interesting offseason, to say the least, dating back to pre-draft when there were rumors that he's definitely taking Mac Jones. And then he stated that he doesn't even know if he's going to be alive on Sunday.
That was the best fake out ever. Like, I mean, I don't know where you fell on that. Like, did you know?
I'm proud to say that I bet on Trey Lance to be the number 3 pick as soon as the 49ers made that trade in late March. So I cleaned up pretty nicely on Trey Lance being drafted number 3. I just felt in my heart of hearts, if you really read the tea leaves on what Shanahan was saying about how he would love like kind of to have that dual threat quarterback. And he said this all like 2020. And I think it's just like, it was one of those things where I trusted my gut and I kept adding to my position and just betting Lance to go 3. I kept doing like exactas of Lawrence 1, Wilson 2, Lance 3, and just kept adding to my position that entire month leading up to the draft. So I had a lot of exposure actually on Lance to go 3, and thankfully it worked out, because if it didn't, I probably would have had to get a second job. But I'm very happy Kyle Shanahan came through with me, him and John Lynch. They made the right decision, I think, and they drafted Lance. But yeah, who knows what he's going to do? Like, we don't know how many touches Trey Sermon's going to get in week 1. Raheem Mostert is still there. Raheem Mostert is still amazing at football. We know Shani likes to run the ball, but I think it's going to be a little questionable how many touches Trey Sermon gets right out of the gates, although I am bullish on his long-term season-long outlook.
Absolutely. I'm very bullish on his season-long and obviously dynasty outlook. Raheem Mostert is injury prone. He has a laundry list of issues, but yeah, I mean, Shanahan literally found some guy, Jermichael Hasty, to like put up 2 good games. And then of course, like the week that I'm like, everyone start Jermichael Hasty. Like, of course, Shanahan gives him 7 touches for like 5 yards. So
last year when he brought in Jeff Wilson and he rushed for 180 yards against the Cardinals.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. He literally before this game, he literally said like, he called Jerick McKinnon, he said he had tired legs or something like that, gave Jerick McKinnon 25 touches in the game. Like, absolutely the king of misdirection.
Kyle Shanahan must be an incredible poker player because no one has any idea what the fuck he's going to do.
Absolutely. He is. I mean, yeah, the whole number 3 pick was crazy. And I refused to believe that Mac Jones was the guy. I was like, Kyle Shanahan's too smart for this. Like, no way. Anyway, that will do it for our first mailbag episode with Action Network's special guest, Casey Halpern. Casey, I can't thank you enough for joining me during this insanely busy time. Please tell everyone where they can find you this NFL season.
Thank you so much for having me on the inaugural mailbag episode, Samantha. I really appreciate it. You could find me on Twitter at CaseyHalp, CaseyHalp, and go ahead and smash that follow button on Action Network HQ Twitter, Action Network HQ. That's all it is. Smash that follow button. My team and I, we're going to be providing valuable insight and great content all season long, and we're looking forward to you following along our journey. And can't wait for this football season to get underway.
Valuable insight, and also in like hilarious formats. Like, I think you were the king of this. So, and I just absolute meme king. So thank you so much again. As a reminder, Sean Kerner and Chris Raybon are here on the Fantasy Flex every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, giving you guys all the DFS waiver wire and rankings info that you need to dominate your fantasy leagues. I will be back next Tuesday with another round of 21 questions, and then next Thursday with another mailbag episode. So don't forget, please send any mailbag questions to mailbag@actionnetwork.com. Thank you again for listening. Please rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts. Download us wherever you like to listen, and we will see you next time on the Fantasy Flex presented by Prize Picks. Peace out, y'all.